Good evening, members, officers and members of the public. If you have mobile phones or other mobile devices on you, if you would kindly put them on silent or turn them off, please. If the fire alarm sounds, it's not a drill, it'll be the real thing, so please leave the building via the marked exits. This committee meeting is being live streamed. It is also being recorded, and the link to the live stream can be found on the Council's website, www.tenderingdc.gov.uk/live meetings. This meeting is a meeting of Tendring District Council's Planning Committee. For the purpose of the recording, I will introduce everyone. I'm Councillor Maria Fowler, Chairman of the Planning Committee, and I will introduce the members of the committee separately. Councillor Maurice Alexander.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor Jeff Bray.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor James Codling.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor Daniel Land. Councillor Geeta Sudra.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor Anne Wiggins.
Good evening, Chairman.
And my Vice Chairman, Councillor John White.
Good evening, Chairman.
Thank you, members. The Council officers assisting the committee this evening are from Committee Services, our officers Katie Coppenall and Bethany Jones. From Planning Services, our planning officers Alison Pope and Katrina Morrow. Our planning manager, John Pateman G. Our corporate director, planning and community, Gary Guyver. And our corporate director of law and governance, Lisa Hastings. There are no changes to the agenda running order. The applications will be presented by the officer, followed by public speaking in the order of the applicant or agent, any members of the public who have already asked to speak for or against the application, a speaker from the town or parish council, and finally the ward councillor. Members of the committee will then have a chance to question the officer, and once all the questions are answered, the committee will then debate. When all the points are discussed, finally I shall ask if we have a resolution and then call for a proposer and a seconder, and the committee will then vote according to the normal rules. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence and substitutions, please, Bethany.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Goldman with no substitution.
Thank you. The minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 12th of, I've got the wrong piece of paper here, 12th of May, Councillor White and Councillor Alexander and Councillor Codling, you were all present at that meeting, so I need a proposer to accept the minutes. Councillor Alexander, Councillor Codling, second? Yes. So could I have a vote from the three of you to accept those minutes? Thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to declare an interest on item A1 being 26001112 full. I am predetermined on this application, and in accordance to the protocols of this committee, I shall be retiring from the committee room.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander.
Now then. Okay, who loves technology?
Councillor Bush. Thank you, Councillor Bush. Thank you, Councillor Oxley. Any further? Councillor Honeywood. Thank you. Any further declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. Item 4, questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38. Are there any, Bethany?
Thank you, Chair. There are no questions.
Thank you. Item 5 is our first application this evening, which is A1/26/00112/full 1 Wellesley Road, Clacton-on-Sea, and to present this item for us, our officer, Alison Pope. Over to you, Alison. You may.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair and members. This application relates to 1 Wellesley Road, Clacton-on-Sea, and seeks planning permission for the change of use of an existing 3-storey building to temporary emergency accommodation, which falls within a sui generis use. The application is before the Planning Committee as it was referred by Councillor Paul Honeywood, the ward member of the adjacent Pier ward. The site occupies a prominent corner position on Wellesley Road and Pier Avenue within the town centre boundary, settlement development boundary and a priority regeneration area. And here you can see the aerial view of the site with Wellesley Road and Pier Avenue as the main streets around it. The building itself is a large late Victorian red brick property. It has historically been used as a hostel for aged and blind people, a respite daycare centre, and most recently was a day school for SEND pupils, which closed in 2020 and has remained vacant since that time. The surrounding area is mixed in character, comprising residential properties, a GP surgery, a church, and commercial uses, reflecting its central and sustainable location. There are other viewpoints here on the slides, one from Wellesley Road, from Pier Avenue, and another one from Pier Avenue. The proposal is to convert the building into 19 self-contained units, each with private bathroom and kitchenette facilities, providing short-term emergency accommodation. External alterations are minimal, limited to the removal of 2 doors, with the overall appearance, scale and character of the building remaining unchanged. The site is located within a strategic urban settlement where growth is directed under the local plan. The proposal would bring a long-term vacant building back into beneficial use, deliver much-needed emergency accommodation, and make use of a highly sustainable town centre location. The building has been vacant since 2020, and evidence has been provided demonstrating no reasonable prospect of it returning to a community use, thereby satisfying policy HP2 regarding the loss of such facilities. Members should also note that the Council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply with a supply of 3.22 years. As a result, the tilted balance under paragraph 11D of the NPPF is engaged. While this is not traditional housing, it still contributes to meeting accommodation needs and therefore weighs in favour of the development. The proposal has been assessed against the 3 objectives of sustainable development. The economic objective looks at the reuse of the vacant building and support to the town centre economy. The social objective provides 19 units of emergency accommodation, addressing a clear need, with evidence in the tendering strategic housing market assessment in March 2025 showing over 400 households in temporary or homeless situations within the district. The environmental objective evidences the efficient reuse of the existing building with no significant external changes. Overall, the scheme performs positively with significant social benefits. There are no significant external alterations, and the proposal preserves the building's established character and contribution to the street scene. In terms of highways and parking, the site benefits from existing access arrangements. It lies in a highly sustainable town centre location with nearby parking, and Essex Highways raise no objection. The development is therefore acceptable in highway terms. Concerns regarding residential amenity impacts have been carefully considered. The building has historically operated at an institutional scale, generating activity. The proposal is not considered more intensive than the lawful use. There are no impacts in terms of overlooking loss of light or outlook. Importantly, a robust management plan condition is recommended, which will secure on-site management, residential placement procedures, and ongoing monitoring and control of the use. This ensures impacts are appropriately managed and overall amenity impacts are acceptable. Each unit is self-contained, providing an appropriate level of privacy, independence, and basic living standards suitable for short-term accommodation. The floor plans are shown on the next few slides that I have here. The ground floor plan, the first floor plan, and the second floor plan. The proposal is a change of use with minimal external works. No significant ecological impacts are identified either. RAM's contributions are not required due to the transient nature of the use. In conclusion, the proposal represents a sustainable reuse of a vacant building in a highly accessible location. It delivers significant social benefits by addressing a clear and pressing need for emergency accommodation. There are no unacceptable harms identified in terms of character, amenity, highways, or ecology. The tilted balance is engaged, and the benefits are not significantly and demonstrably outweighed by any adverse impacts. Accordingly, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions, including a comprehensive management plan to ensure the development operates appropriately. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Speakers, the agent for this application, Mr. Farwad Sahika, is speaking. If you'd like to take a seat. And you have 3 minutes for when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. Good evening to everyone. So as a planning agent, we work closely with Tendering Council Housing Department. Before this application, we did a pre-application leading up to the site, and I think we've quite investigated the prospects of why Tendering Council requires temporary accommodation. We looked in detail of what the requirements were for the homelessness people in the borough or in the area, and I think we identified there was maybe 61 or 62 people in hotels. And so I think when the opportunity came up for the client to acquire the site, we looked at the history of the site, and we felt that this could be a perfect example for Tendering Council to decrease the members of the homeless people that you've got in the borough to move into accommodation that I think in respect works out slightly cheaper for the borough as well as gives more of a positive living environment for people that maybe don't necessarily require to live in hotels. So when we looked at the site, we've kitted it out to quite a good standard. The managing agents that we're working with, the housing department, they've got a good track record of delivering this in other London boroughs. And I think that just in summary, I just think that we felt that this was a good opportunity. So we've worked closely with the council as well as the planning department to try and offer an opportunity for the local tendering council to make it maybe a positive impact in the local area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is the ward member, Councillor Paul Honeywood. Councillor Honeywood, if you'd like to take a seat, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, whilst raising my objections to this application, I will be referring the information that I have requested from the council that may not have been made available to members of the committee. I would like to begin by expressing my concern that I needed to refer this application to the committee. The council has worked closely with the applicant for the best part of a year to shape the application you have before you this evening. In January, 19 rooms were booked and occupants placed there before planning permission had been granted, with TDC paying a total cost of £24,850 for the accommodation. Surely in these circumstances, this application should have been automatically referred to the committee due to the council having a vested interest. This is something that has been raised by the Resources and Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The executive summary supporting this application goes to great lengths, dedicating 3 paragraphs to say that this application is not an HMO. It says, quote, "The scheme would comprise self-contained units, each with its own bathroom and kitchenette facilities," unquote. Since I raised concerns about this application, the initial plans appear to have been amended to show kitchens in every room. But what are the kitchenette cooking facilities? TDC's approach has been that an air fryer and a microwave would be fine in each room, even if that means installing worktop spaces in other parts of the room where they are unable to extend kitchenettes. This doesn't sound like the right approach for our council to me. The facilities management plan says that each room will be furnished with a small mounted table and folded chair, giving me the impression that space in these rooms is going to be tight. The same document states that one of the benefits for the residential guests is the provision of 4 washing machines. I wonder, are they to be in the communal area referred to in the management plan, or is this in another location? The executive summary states that the development would be subject to a high level of management and operational control, secured through planning condition. Could you please let the committee know how this works and how it would be enforced, especially if TDC decided not to enter into an agreement with the provider or terminated the agreement? An application for an HMO would have provided more space for residents. So why aren't we looking at an application for that this evening? The answer is simple. It would not meet the council's own policy on HMOs that has been put in place for very good reasons, but it will create the same issues. In my view, you are being asked to approve cramped and overdeveloped accommodation consisting of 1 room for living, cooking and sleeping, which is certainly not suitable for people and families who are going through one of the most traumatic times of their lives, homelessness. I ask you to refuse this application. If you are minded to approve, have you had a tour of the accommodation? Have you seen the information that has been provided to Councillors Griffiths, Alexander and myself, and will be supplied to the Resources and Services Scrutiny Committee? If the answer is no, I urge you to delay your decision until you have all the facts. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Honeywood. I did introduce you as a ward member. You're actually the adjacent ward member. So now we do have the ward member, Councillor Alexander. When you're ready, Councillor Alexander.
I speak tonight on behalf of the residents who have contacted myself and Councillor Griffiths, who, by chance, Chair, offers his apologies tonight, but he's in Great Ormond Street Hospital with his daughter and unable to come. I was taken back, or we were both taken back by the amount of response we've had to the way that this has appeared and been handled. We look at HMOs, and unless you live in the ward, unless you live in the surrounding wards, like Councillor Honeywood, you don't understand the impact that we have with a huge amount of HMOs and some such like accommodation as we're proposing tonight. Across the road from the proposed site, there are HMOs come flatlets there, 4 in total to be precise. The huge quantity of flats which are being rented out at this very moment at the hospice building, Ellis Road, Penfold Road. I'm not naming all of them, just the targets. In one road alone, there's little or no living accommodation for domestic being taken over in our premier area of the ward, which takes us down to the seafront and then brings us in down to Beaches Road. All this is within the walking distance of this, and I asked if it would be possible that later on we may look at our density policy and to see how it is working in relationship to what we are giving as approvals on some such buildings. But there again, I understand that some such buildings are needed. And they are. But it's all about balance and doing it right. And this is going to rumble on. It's not going to stop here. There are questions that need to be answered. We're now bringing people from outside of our ward and we are putting them into accommodation here. Is this accommodation going to be solely for our own local guys? Are they going to get the top priority on this? These are questions that are being asked to Chris and myself. I have all the authority to speak on Chris Griffiths' behalf. We have to understand that the original application was for 15 flats. Now, I have an intimate interest in that building and a knowledge of its layout. My wife worked there from the moment it opened as a school and closed as a school, short start. And I know the layout, although as the committee, we didn't get a chance to go inside and to allow the committee chair to have a look and to see what's being offered. 19. Can you imagine the transient movement of 19 possibly families with no determination of whether they're going to be there for, they call it short term. Is that for a week? Is that for a month? Or are we talking about a year? I don't know. All I know is that it's going to be very tight. And if there is a communal place anywhere for 19 single people to use, is going to be very difficult. But one of the matters of grave concern, and I can see where errors happen, I can see how they happen, but there must be some resolve to the fact is that people were living in there, to my knowledge and the information I've received, please put me right if I'm wrong, that they were living there before any kind of license or any planning permission was given, and subsequently they had to leave. One of my residents wanted to know...
5 minutes, Councillor Alexander.
I wanted to know who was paying for that. Who was actually paying for that? Was it the government?
Thank you, Councillor Alexander.
Us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. I'm just going to go over to our officer now. Are there any points raised by the speakers that you would like to come back on?
Room sizes were mentioned. If members need throughout the debate any information on room sizes, we have those available. I do recognise that all parties speaking refer to the council as a possible client of this proposal. That may well be the case, but ultimately the planning merits should be before members for this planning committee and need to be separated from any actions of the council as landowner or provider of homeless shelter, etc. Just a reminder. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pateman G. Okay, so now questions for our officers. First of all, we'll go to Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few, so if you'd like me to break and give others a chance, I'd be happy to do that.
That's fine, Councillor Bray.
Thank you. First off, just looking at this, I understand originally there was an application for this to be 15 flats, and now it appears to be 19, whatever we wish to call them. Can you explain to me in simple terms how this is not an HMO?
Thank you, Councillor Bray. An HMO is a house occupied by 3 or more unrelated individuals as their only or main residence, where they have individual lockable bedrooms, but where basic amenities such as kitchen or a bathroom are shared. In this case, each unit is self-contained and has a kitchenette and their own bathroom, shower room facilities.
Okay, thank you. Can I carry on? So basically the principal difference between this and the HMO is that this has a self-contained bathroom stroke kitchen or both. We did hear one of the speakers explain that the room sizes were extremely small, that the kitchen basically spread itself into the living room. So is it fair to say that it does genuinely have a kitchen? And could we have... It is difficult because actually I'm thinking back and I'm wondering why on earth didn't we go inside and have a look actually on reflection. Didn't think of it on the day, so I'll take the bad for that. But wondering why we didn't go and have a look because the internal space is the thing here. So what form does the bathroom stroke shower room take? And do we have those room sizes you mentioned we might have so that we could really determine whether they are genuinely individual units or just a, shall we say, expanded HMO? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. The kitchenettes are kitchenettes. They will have a sink unit and minimal cupboards, I imagine. It's shown on all of the floor plans, the areas that are available as kitchenettes, and the bathrooms stroke shower rooms are also shown on there. The size of the units, the smallest is, hang on, nearly 13 square metres, and the largest is nearly 35 square metres, and they range between those sizes.
Okay, carry on for a minute. Okay. Yep.
Can I just come in just to be clear on the definition of an HMO? In terms of the use class order, the definition of an HMO in terms of class C4 is small shared houses occupied between 3 and 6 unrelated individuals. So therefore, regardless of concerns, well, not regardless, but in terms of understanding the configuration of the property is one aspect of that, but the other aspect is that we're dealing with 19 units here. We're not dealing in more individuals than 6. So as the threshold of HMOs is 3 to 6, that is the official definition of a Class C, C4 use. That is also the definition specifically outlined by your local plan policy, policy LP11, and therefore this is why, because we're dealing with 19, we are dealing with this as a sui generis proposal.
Thank you for that. That's explained that quite well. Appreciate that. Clarification is always a good thing. Wonderful. One of the reasons, as I understand it, that we have C4 on HMOs is because of the impact. Do we feel that the impact of 19, shall we call them small units, would be lesser than that of an HMO. I note that we're insisting on on-site management to manage impact, which sort of gives the impression that we're expecting a not great impact. I'd appreciate general comments on that.
Thank you. A management plan would be in place to manage the residents that would be staying at the property, to control the use of it, the times, potentially the length of stay, and a diary of those who are staying and the length of period that they are staying as well, so that it can be monitored should it need to be by the planning enforcement team, and we could check up on that to check that the use was being as potentially approved. Sorry, what was the other thing you mentioned?
So yeah, it was just basically a question around the reason that we have restrictions on HMOs is obviously because of potential impact. Why would we expect the impact to be any less, given that it's small units as against an HMO?
Yeah, I think here we've not compared the use to an HMO because we're not considering it as an HMO, but we have looked at the use of the building and its previous use and the intensity of its use, and that's why we feel it is acceptable here.
There for a moment, Chair. Give someone else a chance.
Any further questions from anyone else at this stage? Councillor Sudra.
Thanks, Alison. So after site visit yesterday, we sort of mentioned amongst ourselves that we have a similar sort of establishment in Spendles. So is this in comparison very similar, or does it differ, for instance, kitchen-wise, laundry-wise, as people have already sort of asked?
Thank you. Spendles House is council owned, so there's the change there. This property is in private ownership. So Spendles House is a council owned property and it provides 31 flats, and Spendles House is specifically for families. So it is set up with larger flats, and I believe it has washing facilities, communal washing machines and things like that available in communal areas. So it is a very different facility, and possibly just a suggestion that this potential facility would be for single people or couples rather than families.
Thank you, Chair. One more question. Is there anything like this already in Clacton Town?
I believe there will be, yes. Yeah.
Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Chair. I'll come back in because I didn't see anybody else go. So, yeah, just a couple of other short ones. It was also mentioned by one of the speakers as to who would be, who would be able to use this facility, i.e. is it anybody, is it local people, are there any kind of restrictions on that? And the other part of the question, I might as well do both at once because they're linked. We're talking about term and it says temporary. Temporary is a very long word. How long is the maximum stay? Thank you.
At this stage, we are looking at the building and its use rather than who will use it, but they will be users for emergency temporary accommodation, and it is usual for a local authority to place homeless people within temporary emergency accommodation because they have a statutory duty under the housing legislation to do so. Temporary, because of the type of accommodation that it is only suitable for temporary accommodation, and that may be weeks, it could go to months, but there is no time limit as far as I'm aware, but that is something that could be managed within the management plan, which is conditioned as part of the planning conditions proposed.
Thank you for that. That was pretty clear, I think. So the temporary really doesn't have a limit. So temporary could be as long as the word. Okay. And the last question, something else that was brought up was, what if tendering district councils stop using the building for temporary accommodation? Would that mean that somebody could then continue to do so as a private landlord without referring to tendering district council? What I'm saying is, could it become a permanent long-term building that has no relationship to the council at all, that still has 19 barely adequate units in it?
So we are looking at what is before us in planning terms. So it is temporary emergency accommodation. So that is the use that we are looking at. If that changes, then a new full planning application will be required. The use itself will be within the management plan that we will sign off. So if it continues to be used for temporary emergency accommodation by another user, they will need to submit a new management plan to show us how it will be used. If it is not for temporary emergency accommodation, as I said, they will need a new planning permission for any future use.
I can just come into that slightly. There is nothing within the provision of this planning application made to us that specifically restricts, in terms of a legal agreement or condition or anything else, that the only client of this use shall be tendering district council. That specifically, let's be honest, the likelihood is that an authority would be one of the main users of a facility such as this, and maybe other authorities, but there is no specific restriction in that respect. It's a bit like having a school. Most of the time it's the county as an educational authority that will use a school. But I don't have a specific restriction, but that might be a matter of debate you wish to take further.
Mrs. Hastings.
I think I just wanted to add some clarity on the, whilst this is, this is not specifically being used by tendering district council, I understand that's what the applicant wishes to happen, and it may happen on a very interim temporary arrangement. But this council, its cabinet, in January made a decision that a procurement exercise was going to commence for the provision of temporary accommodation, and that is going to be an open and transparent process. That the value is obviously quite high due to the amount of money that the council is spending on temporary accommodation, and it will be available to properties across the district. And whilst I appreciate that this the applicant may desire the property to be used by tendering district council, if they are not successful through that procurement exercise, it will not be used by tendering district council. So, as I say, we are in an interim position. This matter was discussed at the Resources and Services Committee as well, and the Council's management team have also highlighted that there needs to be some additional resource provided to the housing team to be able to, in all intents and purposes, speed up the procurement process. So I just want to say, whatever happens this evening with regards to this planning application, whether it's going to be used or not for temporary accommodation by tendering district council is a separate decision.
Thank you, Mrs. Hastings. Yes, you may, Councillor Bray. Carry on.
Thank you. That's clarified that really nicely. Clearly, there's more than just the planning involved in this, and I sort of was aware of that. I think what I was sort of driving at is, and I think Officer Pateman-G has clarified that for me, is that if this weren't used by tendering district council or anyone else, it could effectively become a block of barely adequate flats that are then rented out. And I'd like to, I think you've clarified that that wouldn't happen, so that's what I was really after. Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Councillor White.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. The explanation we've just heard from the solicitor is helpful, as far as I'm concerned. Added the information from John that we've just heard. It does worry me, though. We've just been told that we can't rule on that, but we've got numerous things in this town where we find that we have a need, we have an essential need to find homes for people in an emergency condition, and we find that there's no homes available because they're filled by other towns that have exactly the same problem. So to be told that we can't use that as a planning reason, I find rather upsetting. The other thing I'd like to raise is this question of time limit. Surely, under the conditions, we can specify a time, a maximum time. Otherwise, it could go on forever and a day. You could move into the flat and you're there forever and ever. And we lose the chance then of having any emergency situations. So my question, I suppose, is could we not have a condition which could go into the management plan? Bear in mind, we haven't seen the management plan, so I don't know quite how that is spelt out. But I would have hoped that we could have put some time limit on it.
Mr. Pateman-G.
Obviously, as officers, when we recommend applications to you, we take into consideration a range of material considerations, not least the existing planning uses of the site and, to a degree, how unrestricted they may have been. Ultimately, when it comes to temporary emergency accommodation, the individual circumstances of the individual and why they need that accommodation are not known. We don't know the specific reason they need this accommodation, because it could be they are homeless because of various circumstances. It could be that the house burnt down and they need a temporary position for a couple of months. It might be a more long-term requirement, be it temporary, but we don't know if that could stretch from literally a week to a couple of years. As long as that is a monitored position and is part of the program of management. There is no reason, it should be dealt with through the management plan as a consideration that I would suggest to members. But if members feel that there is a planning harm for dealing with the length of stay of an individual for a particular unit, which is probably exceptionally might be a year or so, that would need to be sort of perhaps debated out further.
Mrs. Hastings.
Thank you. I can't put my finger on it at the moment, but there is a specific time limit in relation to how long temporary accommodation can be used if it is being used by a local authority for homelessness purposes. So I've got in my head 6 weeks, but I think that's a family that's a maximum of 6 weeks. So I might be able to find out a little bit more whilst I'm here. But if the accommodation is being used by a local authority for emergency temporary accommodation, there will be a fixed period in relation to homelessness legislation.
Thank you, Mrs. Hastings. Councillor Wiggins.
Thank you, Chairman. Just 2 questions. The first one, nothing's been said about the fire service making any checks, because there is yes, there's an emergency exit on the outside, and plus the fact that all these rooms will have locks on them, I'm assuming, because there'll be an entity in their own right. And the fire aspect does concern me greatly, firstly. And the other question I wanted to ask was the capacity of the rooms. I mean, the largest one is 35 metres squared, if I've got that correct. How many people would, what size family could go into that? Is there a maximum or minimum for the rooms that would be in the building? Thank you.
Thank you. The size of the rooms lend themselves to single or couples, I believe, not family accommodation, given the size of them. But that would be a matter for either a local authority that is placing the people there or whoever the residents may be. The fire service checks, if a local authority places homeless people within there, it will be under housing legislation that the private housing team at the council would inspect the property to ensure that it is safe, because they have a duty to ensure that residents that they house are in safe accommodation.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, we'll now go into debate. Members, or I would be looking for a proposal. Councillor Bray.
Thanks, Chair. Just moving into the debate side of things, I'm not ready for a proposal at the moment. I do have concerns here, and I think they're shared by quite a number of people probably in this room. We do have, and I know we're not calling this an HMO, but we do have a number of buildings that house multiple people, let me put it that way. Quite a lot of them in a very small area, which this is adjacent to. And it concerns me that there is a growing number of those, or it feels like there's a growing number. There certainly are plenty. So I am concerned about that. The need for management, impact management, just implies to me that we're expecting a not great outcome, because you don't manage an impact unless you're expecting one. So that seeing that there immediately raised a few alarm bells. I've taken some comfort from some of the things I've heard from the officers and from our legal advisor, particularly on the legal front with regards to the term. Yes, of course, and I should have picked that up earlier, there would be restrictions on the amount of time someone can be in homeless accommodation. Because one of the things that was concerning me was temporary can very easily become permanent if you don't keep an eye on it. That concerns me. My biggest concern, I suppose, remains the long-term use. So what if tendering aren't using it? What then? I've received a little bit of satisfaction on that, I think, but it still bobs in my head a bit. There are quite a few things that leave me a bit concerned. The room sizes and the amenities. I mean, was there a reason why we couldn't see inside the building? Was there any reason for that? I mean, if I'm honest, I didn't think to ask, so I'm as guilty as most. But was there any reason that we couldn't, so we could get a feel, given that this change of use, the size of the rooms, is actually really quite important to it?
No, that's fine. Normally on committee site visits, we will view the surroundings and the property itself. In this case, we don't feel there's a need to go inside. We have the plans in front of us, and the sizes are able to be seen from the plans that have been submitted. So we feel that's sufficient information to be able to draw some conclusions and assess the application.
For the first time this evening, we're probably going to disagree. I think the purpose of a site visit is to see what is actually there. A drawing is one thing, actually being in it, feeling it, touching it is very, very different. You get a much better idea from that. So I'll disagree on that, but the rest I'll sit with. But I can see Mr. Pateman-G wants to come in, so I'll...
Mr. Pateman-G.
The one thing planning doesn't do particularly well is internal arrangements, because ultimately people can move them around without needing any kind of planning permission. They may need building regulations, and building regulations approval would need to apply to this. It would need to apply in terms of fire regulations and other matters, and that's a separate regime for which planning doesn't get involved with. I have the fortunate task of wearing both hats, but ultimately I have to wear my planning hat today. This is for change of use. The operational development before you is simply the external windows and fire escape matters that were put on the slides earlier. And so we are in that sort of difficulty that we are looking at what is the intensification and use of the site and whether that is acceptable to the amenities of the area, as opposed to perhaps looking too closely at some of that internal design work that is not necessarily always in our control. I see where we may be going here. I think it's a case of letting the debate move forward, but I do urge that planning considerations are the primary issue to be looking at here.
No, thank you for that. Duly noted. I think for the moment I'll sit back and see if any others would like to make a comment. Thanks, Chair.
Any further comments, members? Councillor Sudra?
Thank you, Chair. Well, from what we've heard tonight, we do have the situation of homelessness. We do need to address it. I've heard the comments from our monitoring officer, Lisa Hastings, and I think that gives me confidence. It gives me confidence from officers, planning officers, from what I've heard of spendals and, management plan. So I think I'm happy to move this, but that's, my view.
Can I just confirm with you, Councillor Sudra, that that's a proposal to accept approval as per the recommendation in our paperwork? Yeah. Thank you. Any further comments, members? Anybody wish to second Councillor Sudra's proposal? I will. So I shall second the proposal to approve the application. Any further comments, members? Okay. In which case then we'll go to the vote. Those in favour of approval of this application as per our paperwork and any additions to the update sheet, please show. Those against? 3. Abstentions? 2. So that is lost. Any further proposals, members? As that one fell? Oh, Mr. Pateman-G.
This is unusual for me to do this, but I think I see where members are perhaps struggling, and I think perhaps, what are the options on the table in planning terms? Ultimately, what are the planning issues here? The issues are that there is an intensification of use. Does that have harm? Is one of the debating areas that you may wish to look at. The other thing, of course, is the understanding of what kind of impact on the local area is perhaps something you're not sure about, and that is perhaps at the heart of why there's cautiousness here. It might be that you wish us to consider other options such as deferral, to come back with more information. You might wish to consider temporary use in order to allow it to be in use for a degree of time that may therefore give you the evidence and information about its impact over, say, the next 3 to 5 years. You know, these are other options you may wish to consider in terms of that alternative proposal.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Chairman. We're stuck on this one. I think I'd like to propose, and see if I get any backing, that we actually defer it. The things that worry me are that we haven't seen inside. Whatever the planning manager tells us, that we're only altering the outside, I still would like to see inside. And I'm a little bit worried about the size of some of these rooms when one considers that the first application, apparently, which we haven't seen, was for 15. Now, if it was for 15, then presumably the rooms would be slightly bigger. And I take John's point about, well, it's only easy a case of moving things around inside, but it does give a bit of time. And now his suggestion that we could get some more information, I think a deferment is the obvious thing to do. Members aren't happy at the present moment overall, and so we could, a slight deferment for, I won't say two meetings, would give us time to A, have a look inside, B, get more information, when we could come up with a firm decision.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's a very sensible suggestion. I would 100% support that. I think the idea would be to defer if there is more information, and Mr Papenji did imply that there might be, that could come to us. That would be helpful. I think we need as much as we can get. I also concur with Councillor White, Chair, and perhaps we could arrange that we re-site visit and this time have a look inside. I do think that's important just for our own purpose, if that's possible. Thank you.
Mrs Hastings.
The other thing I would suggest in relation to if there was a deferment is that within the committee report next time, whilst it's not a planning consideration, I think it will help the planning committee if we include some more information regarding the difference between housing HMOs and planning HMOs. Just so that, you know, when you're making a decision, it's very important that you make sure that you're taking into account relevant considerations. But I've got a strong sense from the committee that information would be useful.
Thank you, Mrs Hastings. So we will have this one back on the list again for another site visit and to look inside within the next 2 months, if that's possible. So that was proposed by Councillor White. Also further information that we've asked for as well. And seconded by Councillor Bray. Yes, for deferment. So we'll take a vote on that then. So those in favour to defer this application for a second site visit and further information. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those against? 1. So this item is now deferred, and we will have a break for 5-10 minutes and be back shortly. Thank you. Welcome back to Tendring District Council's Planning Committee, Part 2. And the next item on the agenda is item 6, which is A226/00515 FUL, Lacey's View, Colchester Road, Stones Green, Harwich. And to present this item for us this evening, our officer, Katrina Morrow. Thank you, Katrina.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Your attention is drawn to the update sheet, which includes the Environmental Health Officer's response, who raises no objections and suggests conditions. The Environmental Health Officer refers to the foul drainage, but the agent has confirmed that the existing site is already connected to the main sewer, and therefore there is no requirement for a new connection. So just on screen, I've just supplied you with an aerial view of the application site indicated here in red. Right, so here we've just got an aerial view of the application site indicated in red. And I've just shown some images of the site and looking through the site with the site location plan centered and some views. Here I've just shown the proposed site layout plan with the dwelling proposed to the southern side of the site and the retained barn to the north of the site. Here's an indication of the proposed elevations, just demonstrating some of the features of the proposed dwelling. Here shows the proposed floor plans and some of the internal design detailing. This slide just demonstrates what the previous refusal scheme looked like, just for context. This is the front and rear elevation. And just in comparison to the proposed scheme, just so you can see. The application relates to the site known as Lacey's View, which seeks planning permission for a self-built dwelling in a location outside of any defined settlement boundary. The application is a resubmission of a previously refused scheme, and the key matters under consideration have been the principle of development, the tilted balance owing to the lack of 5-year housing supply, the non-compliance with the self-build policy LP7, the design for protected characteristics under the Equality Act 2010, the previous refusal reasons not overcome, and the conflict with paragraph 84E of the NPPF. The proposal presents a visually extensive form of development with a notable linear spread and footprint across the site. This results in a scheme that would still read as substantial and prominent within the rural landscape, failing to reflect the sporadic and modest pattern of development and the characteristics of the surrounding area. The council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing supply, and as such the tilted balance is engaged. The need to provide housing that meets the needs of groups with specific housing requirements is acknowledged. The proposal would result in an overall increase in residential accommodation, and so on this basis it is considered appropriate that the tilted balance applies in this instance. However, whilst the proposal would deliver the modest benefit of one self-built dwelling and the proposed dwelling has been designed to meet the needs of an occupier with protected characteristics, this benefit would not significantly and demonstrably be outweighed by the identified harms arising from the unsustainable location, the associated car dependency, and the erosion of the rural character of the area. Nor would the proposal meet the self-build criteria under policy LP7, and the personal circumstances of this case do not outweigh the identified harm arising from the proposal's conflict with national and local policy. The applicant contends that the proposal is bespoke and carefully designed, meeting the requirements of paragraph 84E of the NPPF, which considers isolated homes in the countryside in special cases where design is of exceptional quality, as detailed in the committee report. The policy is intentional in its wording, using the term exceptional quality, which applies only to a very limited category of isolated homes in the rural landscape. Paragraph 84E of the NPPF should not be fragmented but read in solidarity. It states the design is of point E of paragraph 84 states the design is of an exceptional quality in that it is truly outstanding, reflecting the highest standards in architecture, and would help to raise standards of the design more generally in rural areas. And it would significantly enhance its immediate setting and be sensitive to the defining characters of the local area. The application therefore raises two principal questions: whether a new dwelling is acceptable in the countryside, and whether the design is of an exceptional quality that satisfies paragraph 84E of the NPPF. Officers conclude the answer to both the questions is no. Officers acknowledge the self-build benefits and afford these positive weight. However, policy LP7 specifically directs where self-build housing should be located. The site falls well outside the relevant distance thresholds and does not satisfy the policy criteria. The proposal delivers some economic and social benefits. However, officers conclude that the environmental harm associated with the new dwelling in an isolated countryside location outweighs those benefits. Paragraph 84E deliberately establishes an exceptionally high policy threshold. The test is not whether a dwelling is well designed or bespoke. The test is whether it is truly outstanding or innovative and reflects the highest standards of architecture. This is a deliberately rare exception within national policy. Officers recognise the thought and care given to the design. However, the dwelling remains fundamentally a traditional residential property. While some adaptations may improve the living conditions of the intended occupier, the building itself is not considered architecturally exceptional. The dwelling could be occupied and function entirely as a standard market house without alteration. Officers are not persuaded that the proposal is truly outstanding or that it reflects the highest standards in architecture. Furthermore, the existing animal therapy barn to be retained could still continue its use whether the dwelling is approved or not. Planning decisions must consider whether the development itself is acceptable in planning terms. It is not thought that the previous reasons for refusal under the 2025 application, which forms a material consideration, has been overcome. The application is therefore recommended for refusal as detailed in the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Katrina. Our first speaker on the list for this application is on behalf of the applicant, Miss Beth Deacon-Bates. If you'd like to take a seat. And you have 3 minutes from when you hit the red button.
Good evening. I speak on behalf of the applicants, the Keston family. This is an application for one genuine self-built dwelling, a purpose-designed home for a disabled child. The central issue tonight is weight. The officer report accepts that the tilted balance applies, accepts that the self-build is a benefit, accepts that the proposal has been designed to meet the needs of a person with the protected characteristics, confirms that the design is thoughtful and bespoke, and confirms that there are no technical objections. The recommendation, therefore, turns on the weight given to the location and the rural character. We ask members to approach those issues through the evidence of the specific case. The applicant's child is disabled. A conventional sustainable location would be overwhelming and in conflict with her protected characteristic. The site is already part of the child's therapeutic routine due to her permitted therapy barn that you saw yesterday with the goats. The family already has to travel to that site twice a day. Living on site would consolidate existing mandatory journeys and allow the home and therapy space to work as one stable environment for a disabled child. That is why the public sector equality duty matters here. The design case is also important. Neuroinclusive means planning places for different sensory, cognitive, social and regulatory needs, rather than just assuming one neurological experience as the norm, that everybody can live and work and thrive in a sustainable location. This dwelling has been designed with members of the Neurodiversity and Planning Design Panel, ensuring that autistic design principles are met while balancing the rural design of this local area. This is relevant to paragraph 84E of the NPPF. Exceptional design is not limited to visually dramatic architecture. It can also arise through a design process and a functional outcome that raises the standards. You all saw that house that sat on the site next door. This proposal shows how a rural dwelling can be shaped by neuroinclusive principles. In fact, a Freedom of Information request to tendering revealed that there is no other scheme like this in the district that has been designed specifically to meet the needs of autistic people. Members are respectfully asked to give substantial positive weight to the disability-related needs and how this proposal has been designed to meet the needs of autistic people. We also would like to highlight that we have suggested that the applicant would be willing to enter into a Section 106 agreement. This would ensure that the house is first marketed to households within tendering with evidence needs of sensory, cognitive, social or regulatory needs that would be supported by the home's very specific design. Members, we ask you to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is a member of the public speaking in favour of the application, Councillor Anne Oxley. Councillor Oxley, if you'd like to take a seat, and you have 3 minutes from the time you push the red button.
Good evening. Today I want members to think beyond the plans, policies and paperwork for a moment and think about the family behind this application. This isn't simply a proposal for another house. This is a family trying to create the right environment for their daughter, who lives with autism and sensory impairments. The land and animals at Lacey's View have become an important part of their life, of her life, providing comfort, routine, and a safe space where she feels secure. As someone who regularly meets families caring for loved ones with additional needs, I know how life can be. Simple things many of us take for granted can be huge challenges. This house has been designed around those needs. It is about giving a young person the best possible opportunity to live safely, happily, and with dignity. Planning is about places, but it also is about people. I fully understand the policy concerns, but I believe this is one of those rare cases where the personal circumstances deserve significant weight. For this family, this is not just a planning application, it is their future. And I urge you to look at this. I also urge you to look at this as a parent, which I'm sure most of you are here tonight. I don't know what it is like to live with a child with special needs, so I urge you to look at this applicant with a
Thank you, Councillor Oxley. And our final speaker on this item is the ward member, Councillor Mike Bush. Councillor Bush, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Chairman, members and officers. Yes, I referred this planning application to committee for consideration as I'm strongly in support of this proposed scheme. Having submitted a referral statement to support this application, it was based on numerous material consideration compliances, which I believed in. I understand there are some policy issues that are contentious, but notwithstanding my initial statement, I thoroughly reviewed the officer's report and recommendation refusal, which I'm thoroughly disappointed with. Due to the time allocated for me to present these points, I've headlined some specific points for consideration for members. This development, as it was mentioned, is a notable linear spread sporadic in a outside the settlement boundary. It is wedged between a whole strip of properties. Some are grandiose. This is the next door neighbour. This is like Buckingham Palace. So when we look about the rural benefits, for me, when you look at that property and where it's laid, that child will spend her life, which is in terms of her limited abilities to actually enjoy the animals there. It is designed around her, it is bespoke, and I know the comments is that it doesn't qualify as a bespoke self-build. It is, because it is bespoke, and it is a self-build. So how you want to interpret them policies is a decision that members you can sort of ponder over. You know, councils also, we can't demonstrate 5-year housing supply due to the plan that's in the draft. So currently, we're at 3.8 years instead of 5. So this current position, as I understand it as a layman, it actually provides presumption in favour of development. Also, how does it impact? How does it impact on the policies and the weight of those policies that's been cited in that document? And what influences that? So we're talking about reasonableness. The dwelling is bespoke, as I said, and I totally agree that the application will erode the rural character of the area. If you go and visit it, you'll see that whole strip. It's covered with a hedgerow and screening, and it's no different. It's modest. It all fits into the actual Stones Green, Colchester Road hamlet. So for me, I then look at the consultations. And on the consultations, ecological appraisal, acceptable, subject to some conditions. Highways, the proposal was accepted, subject to conditions. It goes on, I mean, ecology, the landscape officer. And when we look at the public, there is no objections to it. In fact, you know, obviously, you know, we've seen some support here, but there is no objections. The only objections that come from here is from the actual officers. And so that's what I want to end this on. I'll just say to members, please consider some thought of what I've said to maybe help you make your decision this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bush. I'm just going to go over to our officer. Is there anything, any comments made by the speakers that you'd wish to come back on?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions for the officer. Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Chair. The update sheet we've received tonight is quite substantial. Don't often see them this big, with a great deal of detail, which I thank you for. It's always good to have detail. I like lots. I think one of the things it says here that this is not a self-build. It looks very self-build to me. Unless I've read that wrong, why wouldn't it be?
Thank you. It hasn't been stated that it's not a self-build. It just doesn't meet the self-build policy. The self-build policy is detailed within the committee report. At point 7.18, it specifically states that the council will consider on their merits proposals for small developments of new self-build and custom-build homes on land outside of, but within a reasonable proximity to settlement development boundaries, where they will still support a sustainable pattern of growth in the district and are brought forward by individuals or associates of individuals who will occupy those homes. All new dwellings on such developments must either be safely accessible on foot within 600 metres of the edge of the settlement development boundary of one of the district's strategic urban settlements or smaller urban settlements, or be safely accessible on foot within 400 metres of the edge of the settlement development boundary on one of the district's rural service centres, or involve the redevelopment of vacant or redundant previously developed land that can be shown with evidence to be unviable for employment use. This proposal fails all of that criteria.
Okay, thank you. That was nice and clear. Okay, so primarily it's the location that makes it doesn't comply as a self-built property. But okay, so that clears that one up. We're calling it a rural settlement. Now, I think most people who've been around planning committees for a long while will tell you I'm the first one to object to things outside of a settlement boundary. This one has been described as unique and bespoke. Would you agree with that description?
I've detailed the officer's opinion in the committee report. Thank you.
Okay. It certainly looks unique and bespoke to me. So that being the case, and the fact that it's being built specifically for a purpose, in this case for the use of a disabled person, I see in 7.47 on the update sheet, you've mentioned that, and that you've taken into account the Equality Act, and you say that however the personal circumstances do not outweigh the identified harm. With respect, that's a weighting that would be personal, isn't it? My weighting could be different to yours, couldn't it?
Mrs. Hastings.
Yeah. So, public sector equality duty, in all decisions that local authorities make, we have to give due regard to that duty. The report highlights that one of the protected characteristics, disability, is impacted by this decision one way or the other. So the protected characteristics do not, it's very rare in planning decisions that they are impacted, and especially to the degree that this one is making reference to the disability. So in this case, you are under a duty to give due regard to that protected characteristic and the information that you've got before you. The other thing I would say is that a refusal of planning permission which will affect efforts to remove or alleviate barriers connected to a protected characteristic or a formulaic approach by a planning decision in respect of equalities, the public sector equality duty is often scrutinised in planning decisions. So you are correct, Councillor Bray, it is something that you wouldn't normally use in weighing up a decision for planning committees. As I said, it's quite rare, but where it is applicable, you have to take that into consideration.
Lovely, thank you. That's really nice and explained. Brilliant. I can't argue with the explanations tonight, but basically what we're saying is that I could weight it differently to you, and I might see it as much more important than you do in the context of the whole planning thing. That's fine. The position of the property, we're aware it's outside of the land, but there are, as has been mentioned by one of the speakers, a substantial number of properties along that curtilage. Some of them, it must be said, could not be described as small. So in what way do you feel that this would, you describe it as not conforming to the rural landscape or affecting the rural landscape? Why do you take that particular view? Because again, that is a view, isn't it?
Okay. So the primary starting point for us is your development plan. Your development plan seeks to protect rural character, the countryside, take into account the need for agriculture, openness, and so on. Obviously, filling it up with houses would be counterproductive to that aim of your development plan. On the whole, we do have some exceptions to allowing development within the countryside. Some of these come under permitted development in respect of barn conversions that are already there, and the government have got something wonderful called prior approval in Class Q. We also have a specific understanding where we have rural need to serve the interests of the rural environment, mainly agriculture, where you do have they're typically regarded as agriculturally tied properties that are allowed on that basis of a direct need to service the countryside. And that is also expressly pushed within the NPPF as well. Ultimately, we as a council have gone through this due regard of our residential needs in terms of serving the population, ensuring that infrastructure is in the right location for the allocation of housing. And in your development plan, you have not sought to go beyond settlement boundaries with the exception of affordable housing adjacent to, or indeed self-build, again within a specific measurement and access requirements in that respect. So we have both a policy position in terms of maintaining the values of sustainability to ensure the infrastructure is in the right place, the housing is in the right place, as well as the protection of the countryside as a whole. Ultimately, the NPPF supports that position, and we have talked a lot about the exception element, which has always been the kind of architectural goal to get an exceptional house out into the countryside. Of course, the starting position for that particular policy is that says there shall not be an isolated property. It talks about, which I appreciate in this case is almost the opposite of what is being required here. They want an isolated property to serve a particular need. Ultimately, the permission you are dealing with lies with the land, not the individual. This property will have a lifetime beyond the individual, and you are looking at the planning harm of that in a wider sense. I can only leave it there.
Thank you, Chair. Just very, very quickly, just to confirm, the land concerned is not agricultural. That is correct, Jess?
You got me there. Because of the, it was agriculture, and because we've got a barn use for that purpose. Can we come back to you on that, just to double check ourselves, please?
If it helps, I did ask why we were there, and the land we looked at that the property was going to be built on was very much scrub land that appeared to have been used for small animals, I think was the answer. So
the answer to that might be agricultural, but we need a visual look at what our use might be versus the lawful use of what the site is, or what may be perceived to be. We need to be clear. So can we come back to you shortly on that?
Absolutely.
Members, any questions for our officer? Councillor Alexander.
Chair, should we just let the officers debate this and then maybe we can move on? Because I'm sitting here with my mouth open, waiting to go, chomping at the bit, so to speak.
I think the answer is we don't have a definitive answer in respect of the current use of land in the context of the information we have immediately available. The default would be that it's agricultural, most likely, but I can't be 100% sure because of the barn permission and to what extent that was the red line was in that facility. So ultimately, we have looked at this purely in terms of the proposal, as opposed to where the proposal is coming from in terms of use. I apologise for having not have that information available. If we find something more that we can provide during the debate, we will, but I do apologise.
Thank you for that, Chair. Just to say thank you. There certainly wasn't a field of wheat there, I can tell you that.
Councillor Alexander, you may go ahead now. It's all right.
Would it be possible to put up the proposed site layout plan, please? Oh, excellent, thank you. Looking at it, top right, the grey rectangular building. I'm assuming that is the barn that was there, recently built for keeping of small animals.
That's correct, Councillor.
Was that barn subject to or had to go through the same planning process as this house, or did it come under a different scheme?
It was assessed under a separate scheme, under a full application in 2021.
I'm awfully sorry, but I'm not exactly a spring chicken and my hearing is not very good and the microphones are bad in here tonight. I can barely hear what's going on. Would you mind repeating that for me?
The scheme for the barn was submitted under a separate application in 2021.
Okay. When we were on the site visit, the one thing that did strike me was that the land, obviously it was very small, and it was well fenced off, and a part of its own curtilage, it had its own land there, and certainly would not have been of any use in agricultural terms at all. I really wanted to know whether or not that was agricultural land or not, and what grade agricultural land it would be. But if you haven't got that to hand, I'll move on.
Right, going back into the planning history of this site, looking at the application for that barn, it was proposed as a barn. On that basis, I would be of the opinion that you are dealing with an agricultural use site at this moment in time.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Inspector's reports. Has this application in its previous life ever been to an inspector, or is there any evidence of that?
I'm not quite sure of your meaning of the question. Do you mean if we've had any other examples in the district? We have had one. So the most recent example of in terms of an exceptional property was in Dovercourt in 2020. That was dismissed by the appeal inspector while they considered the access, disabled access, to be a benefit. They overruled that on the basis that the harm to the countryside by placing a property in the countryside was not in line with our development plan. That's the only example we've had that I am able to find a record of in the last 15 years.
Thank you very much indeed. Do you, I could be wrong here, but it is now, you say it's now 2026, and we've moved on some 6 years with a complete change of government and the way they are looking at planning applications in the amount that's required, and relaxing some rules while increasing others. Does this fall, the one in Harwich, does it fall under the same scope as the one we're talking about here?
No, because ultimately you have to determine the application before you on the individual merits at the time. This application will, compared to one in 2020, your local plan was in a different position back then. You have a current local plan, and you also have an emerging local plan, which you should probably give only limited weight at this time. And you have obviously the NPPF. The NPPF has been adjusted and changed a number of times since that date. It was only to give you an example that there has only really been one other sought to be exceptional. Like we said, the bar, if you're looking at this in terms of exceptional property, is exceedingly high and very rare.
Should we be minded to approve this? One, would we be setting a precedent, and what other damage could this possibly could we possibly occur by doing so?
I'm just going to bring Mrs. Hastings in here before I go over to Mr. Pateman G. Mrs. Hastings.
Okay, so again, normally personal circumstances and considerations would not be a material consideration. But it is the case that in relation to, again, protected characteristics, if there are, it is significant, then that, those personal circumstances can be regarded as a material consideration. I accept from a planning perspective, as Mr. Pateman G has said, that you're looking at the land, but there are various situations where a protected characteristic, and I'm going to refer to, Gypsy and Travellers. There's been lots and lots of case law about Gypsy and Travellers where their protected characteristic has meant that they have been granted planning permission in places where it wouldn't normally have been given planning permission. I'm just using that as an example. And also as well, I think the point is, would it set a precedent? No, it wouldn't set a precedent, because you are saying that this, you would be saying that this situation was exceptional for the reasons you would give. Now, if you were minded to approve, well, the one thing I would say is to err on the side of caution, is that there is also case law to say when you're granting permission against officer's recommendation, you have to come up with reasons for granting permission as well. And that would include as well subject to conditions and things. So, that's just, we've got to give that consideration. And the point I'm making is we might not be able to do all of that this evening if you were minded to go for approval. So I hope that helps with those questions.
Mr. Pateman G.
Chair, may I ask for a momentary break that I may discuss with my officer's position, please?
Yes, we'll have a 5-minute break. Katie, if you could stop the live stream, please. Thank you. Welcome back to Tendring District Council's Planning Committee and part 3. So over to Mr. Pateman G to pick up where we left off.
Yes, I apologise for the interruption. Sometimes just some clarity is needed, and I appreciate that. Ultimately, really, what I've got left today is I do agree with Mrs. Hastings in terms of her answer in terms of precedent. Ultimately, you know, there is a material risk that going against the specific policies as laid down in your local plan and so on, as an inconsistency of planning, it could be referred or relied upon by other people trying to put in housing development elsewhere, although you would have to judge that on its individual merits and whether they are such similar applications to compare and take further weight from. So the answer is we don't think it would create a precedent, but it is a risk ultimately.
Thank you, Mr. Pateman G. We will now go into debate, unless there's any further questions. Councillor Alexander, and then Councillor Bray, and then Councillor White.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Very interesting application. Certainly have enjoyed the rhetoric up to now. Yes, I do agree that we must always follow policies, but in any society in which we live, there's always got to be exceptions. And I think, and I've always admired parents who dedicate their life to any child who needs that extra support. And as you know, autism doesn't come as a package. It comes in different levels on the spectrum, and it can be trying, very trying. I have personal experience of that. The problems which I have with this is that, as usual, I will, in cases, always back the officers, because I believe that they are, in effect, the professionals, and I am lay to their professionalism. So, but we hold another role here, and we act our chair in a different way. And that's what I'm doing tonight. In the past, historically, and I'm sure you remember, I know Councillor White will, that we've actually given planning permission on this, on the pretext that there is a genuine need for that building. And then I'm not sure how that would actually interact with future, because we spoke about future sales, etc., and how it would look for the future. There would be some clause that would be tied up in it. Whether that would be an acceptable thing, I'm not sure. But I do know that we have done that in the past, and I think maybe it would pay us to look at that now, to be able to allow this building, because we're talking about a young child. Autism isn't a life-threatening disease. It's not like the cancer or anything like that, which is going to drastically reduce your life sometimes by an awful lot. So child may be there for one heck of a long time. So up to now, I'm just wanting to hear what my colleagues have got to say. But Chair, if there's any way that we can get round it by doing that, then I think we should go for that.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Chair. I might go just a little further. I've been known to do that. First of all, let's deal with the planning side of things as we're in debate, which strictly the planning side. Yes, it's outside the boundary. We're aware of that, and normally I'm one of the strongest advocates of protecting our boundaries, and I think, well, I've demonstrated that in years gone by. And it doesn't, because of that and because of its location, primarily it doesn't fulfil the self-build. But let's look a little further. We spoke about exceptional properties and a very high bar to be an exceptional property. I would argue there's more than one kind of exceptional. There can be an exceptional looking property but there can equally be an exceptional functioning property. This property has been described as bespoke, unique, different in what it does. And actually, when we're talking about, and I think Councillor Alexandra just alluded to the long-term prospects of the property, when we go past the lifespan of the current owners, I actually see it as a legacy to have a property with those qualities. So I don't see that as a negative at all. I see this as a unique property, which is exceptional because it's unique, and be exceptional because of what it provides, that, let's be honest, your average house wouldn't. That's exceptional. It's just exceptional in a different way. And that's the way I see that, and I can see you reaching for your microphone, so shall I break and let you comment?
I was going to, my colleagues might want to chip in here, just simply word of warning, not going against the direction of travel of your debating here, only simply that I would not want to impose an interpretation on the NPPF wording, that only that you are looking at this in the context of an exceptional material consideration in respect of your development plan position. Trying to effectively impose a narrative to the NPPF, I feel, would be I'm not sure that would be the best idea. I think we have to look at this as you're looking at this as an exception in respect of your local plan, and you're looking at those reasons to consider that.
Thank you. I appreciate your input there. I would reverse that and say that I don't think it's the NPPF's position to use a word like exceptional and impose what it means on me. So what an individual sees as exceptional may be different. I think a development that is unique is exceptional by, well, grammatically, unique is exceptional, isn't it? It's an exception. And so that's my view, and it's my view alone, and I'm not suggesting anybody else should interpret it that way. I do. More than that, I look at section 7.47, where we say that the personal circumstances of person concerned do not outweigh the identified harm. I disagree. When I weight them, I think the personal circumstances of the person concerned do outweigh the identified harm, and that is simply a matter of opinion, as we know weighting always is. So, and as we often say, and we've said before, officers come from a slightly different angle to councillors, so we will often weight things differently. That's not a criticism of any kind. It's not intended to be. I just weight it differently to you. Because of those two things, and for those reasons, and specifically the second one, which is I weight that differently, Chair, I'm going to propose approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Mr. Guyver.
Thank you, Chairman, and no, really useful debate that we're having. So just to go back slightly on the point about interpretation of the NPPF and whether it's exceptional or not, I take it back to basis in terms of general planning law, is that you determine planning applications in accordance with your development plan unless other material considerations indicate otherwise. And what we've been talking about tonight is the special personal protected characteristics of the individual, is a material consideration. The officers, in coming up with their recommendation, have added weight to the various material considerations in coming to a recommendation. But from the debate this evening, the conclusion appears to be heading towards that the weight should be different. That's perfectly acceptable. We've also covered the point about whether a decision to approve would create a precedent, and the advice given is that it wouldn't create a precedent. Every application needs to be judged on its merits, on the time, on the circumstances available, but we have also indicated what could be the practical implications of future people perhaps interpreting the decisions that have been taken on one application to make a case for something else. But if we put that aside, I think that the proposal that you're making, Councillor Bray, is for approval on the basis that the weight given to the material consideration of the personal exceptional circumstances of the individual and their requirements outweigh the harm, in this particular case, and that you're suggesting that approval should be granted on that basis. And if that is the will of the committee going forward, of course, when we grant planning permissions, it's very rare that we grant them without conditions being attached. And if that is the way we want to go forward, we can advise on conditions. We may not necessarily be able to work through all the detail right here, but if we are able to indicate what conditions we would generally look to apply in this case, and seek delegation for the officers to take that away and work up the detail in issuing a decision, that is something that we could do. But I hope that assists with your proposal, and I hand back to you, Chairman, because of course with a proposal you may need a seconder.
Councillor White.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think that is exceedingly helpful from Mr. Guyver, and certainly I would be prepared to second. There's two little things I think we would ask the officers to when they tie up the conditions. We've got the existing property, which is quite legal, that is the barn, and I wonder whether there is a scheme whereby the barn and the house can be tied together under the conditions. In other words, we're not saying that we want two properties on that bit of land. We want one property, and in view of the conditions that we are suggesting, I think the need for it, the two items need to be tied together. It's part of the problems that this young lady suffers from. We don't want another development on them, and I hope that using the conditions that we're expecting the officers to pull together for us, it might be nice if we can somehow tie the two properties together. But yes, I'm very pleased to second this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Alexander, then Councillor Bray.
Actually, I was going to second that proposal, so thank you, Councillor White. One thing I'm a little bit confused, because if you remember at the site visit, I actually asked that, is this to be attached to the property? And I was under the understanding it was for small animals rather than any form of domicile, okay, by human beings. But if I don't dislike the idea, I think it's a very good idea actually, because it gives you more space in many ways. The footprint is conjoined rather than separated. But wouldn't you have to submit another application of sorts, or can that be done by tweaking what we've all existingly got?
Mr. Pateman-G.
Okay, so let's just think about these conditions slightly. I probably should point out that the applicant in the respect of this application has already ventured some suggestions of agreement in respect of potential conditions, because obviously they're looking to promote and support their proposal. So I would suggest that in respect of consideration of certain conditions, that there would not be likely not to be a resistance. The point about the barn itself, the site, I don't know if you've got the red line plan, but the proposal you have before you is the entirety of the site. It doesn't have an exception to that barn building. That barn building is within the red line plan. This proposal is for a dwelling, and by default a dwelling with domestic curtilage. Now I would suggest, given the connection that has been expressed, it is not unreasonable to, on occupation of the dwelling, that the barn is considered to be an ancillary, be it a large, outbuilding that serves the interests of the property, and that could be one of your conditions taken forward. I do have a list of potential conditions for you, should that be of any help.
Thank you, Mr. Pateman G. Councillor Bray?
Thanks, Chair. I think Mr. Pateman G just preempted me quite heavily there. That was brilliant. Superb. And thank you to Mr. Guyver for that detailed explanation. It was really, really useful and sort of explained it really clearly. I'm quite comfortable with that. And I suspect most of the conditions we will have heard similar ones before, so I don't think we're going to object to those too many. I'm very happy for that to be added to my proposal. No issues at all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Yeah, Mr. Guyver?
Thank you, Chairman. What I would suggest then, as we have a proposal and a seconder for the principal way in which we're looking to go forward, that of course we need a resolution, and what I would suggest is that the resolution is that the Corporate Director for Planning Community be authorised to grant full planning permission subject to the conditions which I'm going to ask Mr. Pateman G to indicate the headings of what those conditions would be, but that the delegation allows the officers to take those away and actually work up the detail to go into the decision notice.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Bray?
I'm ecstatic with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And your seconder, Councillor White?
Yes, also.
Right, well, in that case then, we'll go to the vote on that. Oh, sorry.
We'll jump
yes,
into the conditions that you might be considering. So ultimately, in terms of planning conditions, standard time limit would apply. That's the requirement under the Act. Approved plans is also another standard condition in respect to ensuring that the plans we see are the ones that get built. Self-build is a standard model condition to seek that the building is a self-build property. We impose that because it does have implications of biodiversity net gain, because there's an exception reason in respect to self-build. I'm going to skip that one for a second and come back to it. RAMS is also another standard requirement and would be conditioned in this respect. Construction management scheme would be a suggestive condition. The ecology conditions as recommended in your papers would be a further condition. I think that's 3 of those. Landscaping, facing materials. We also have mentioned the barn to be occupied only ancillary to the dwelling. Retention of parking as provided on the plans. Energy efficiency measures is a standard policy requirement and a standard condition as well. Foul drainage to be confirmed because we are still looking at those details. Now, just further to that you may debate further, removal of permitted development rights for extensions and fences, and so all PD rights, on the basis that this is an exceptional site. And the last one is that the occupation to be restricted for those requiring, and apologies if I get this wrong, but in terms of the protected characteristic, we will work out the exact wording, but the protective characteristic in this case to be at least one of the occupiers to be of that nature, and if we were to think about this in line with agricultural dwellings, their descendants on that basis, or one level down. So if they were to get married and still living here, if they died, the partner wouldn't have to just leave instantly. So we would have that succession built in. So it's essentially similar to an agriculturally tied property condition, but in respect of this particular need. So that's the rundown. I'm looking at my colleagues thinking there's no concerns there, so I would suggest that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pateman G. Councillor Bray?
Yeah, except that I think all of those are sort of roughly where I thought. The last one called me out, though. That's quite clever, that. Yeah, I like that a lot. No problem with any of that, Chair. And
your seconder, Councillor White?
Yes, happy.
Okay, now we will go to the vote. Just one moment. Mr. Guyver.
Thank you. Just before we go to the vote, so I can summarise that, that the Corporate Director, myself, will be authorised to grant full planning permission subject to conditions relating to standard time limit, approved plans, self-build, RAMS, construction management, ecology, landscape, facing materials, the barn being confirmed as ancillary to the use of dwelling, retention of parking, energy efficiency, foul drainage, removal of permitted development rights, occupation being restricted for those protected characteristics and associated descendants. I think that was all of those. And that also, in taking that decision, you delegate to myself as corporate director to indicate the reasons for approval that are on the lines we just discussed in the debate, as agreed by the proposer and seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Guyver. All those in favour of approval, please show. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? Abstentions? 1. So that application is approved. Thank you, members. So we've just one more item on the agenda, which is the report for planning and enforcement, which, if there are no questions for Mr. Pateman G, that is noted. And the date of next meeting will be Tuesday the 7th of July 2026. Thank you very much, members.